just to try to even it out a little bit for the students. So I'm going through my arguments, and one funny thing is that we have graduates from fire school that are serving as missionaries, emissaries for the Lord around the world in many nations. And we've got a couple in their 50s in Israel. Right now they're in Haifa. In fact, they haven't left Haifa in the midst of the bombing because they minister to homeless and hurting people and drug addicts and Jew and Arab alike, and they feel we need to be there to show mercy to these people. Well, we send out a CD with teaching and preaching from our fire classes, our fire services, to our missionaries on the field every month. And they sent out the DVD of me having this debate. And here's this couple in Israel, and the husband's listening to it, and I'm going at this with real passion and arguing the points and all this. And he says, Carol, you got to come here. Dr. Brown is teaching the church replaced Israel. She goes, no, it couldn't be. He goes, really, you got to come? So finally, he persuades her to come in, and she's sitting there, and they're both absolutely stunned. I mean, here they are in Israel, serving the Lord with great love for the Jewish people. I mean, a tremendous love for the Jewish people. And the leader of the school and ministry is teaching that the church has replaced Israel. And then they got to the end, and they realized it was just part of this debate we were having. And then I gave answers to all of my points, and he just sent me a note. He said, look, I'm not a young man. He said, I could have had a heart attack. He was joking. It stunned him. Well, the reason I mentioned that was that I kept quoting this verse from Matthew, that the kingdom's been taken from the Jewish people and given to the Gentiles. But I didn't tell them where the verse was. I kept throwing on this little bone. In the midst of debate, sometimes it's hard for you to remember each reference, and someone's coming at you with a lot of stuff. And two very sharp young students were debating me. I kept saying, yeah, but it's written there. But I never said where the verse was, because if I said where the verse was, all I had to do was look at the next verse that said it had to do with the religious leaders. It was not about the Jewish people as a whole. It just had to do with the religious leaders, the hypocritical leaders. It was being taken away from them and given to another people that would bear its fruit, which first references the Jewish apostles, leaders. So anyway, I kept throwing that out just to see if they would finally grab hold of it, and they never did. And then afterwards I said, I kept throwing that out to you, but I wouldn't give the reference to see if you got it, because all you have to do is read the next verse, and that explains it. Matthew 21:43, read verse 44, and that explains it. In that section there. Anyway, it's the same with some of these objections. Wow, this is a hard one. Read the next verse. Keep going. So no, Psalm 51 does not repudiate sacrifice or downplay the importance of sacrifices. It builds up the importance of repentance, and with a repentant heart, the sacrifices are acceptable and pleasing in God's sight. What about Psalm 40? Psalm 40. This is actually quoted in the New Testament, and we'll look later at the week to see if Hebrews changed it, played with the Bible, messed around with it, because they didn't like what the verse actually said. Psalm 40. Look at what the psalmist says beginning in verse 6. Again, Psalm of David. Sacrifice and offering you did not desire, but my ears you have pierced. We won't get into the different meanings there, different potential readings. Burnt offerings and sin offerings you did not require. Then I said, here I am, I've come. It's written about me in the scroll. I desire to do your will, O my God. Your law is within my heart. I proclaim righteousness in the great assembly. I do not see on my lips. He goes on and then begins to confess his sin. Don't withhold your mercy from me. Verse 11, verse 12. My sins have overtaken me. What's happening here? Why does the New Testament apply this as a messianic prophecy? David here gets a revelation. Bimgilat Sefer Katuv Alai, in the volume of the book, it's written about me. Zevach u'mincha lo chafatzta. Sacrifice and offering you didn't desire. Lo v'chata'a lo sha'alta. You didn't ask for burnt offerings and sin offerings. B'Megillat Sefer Katuv Alai, in the volume of the book, the scroll of the book, it's written about me. He gets this revelation. What you really want is me. You want my whole life given over in complete obedience. When I'm reading about the sacrifice, the offering, you're actually talking about me. You're talking about my life. For example, the olah, which is the burnt offering, was given up wholly to the Lord. It was a symbol of complete dedication. It was not a sin offering. It was a symbol of complete dedication. So the worshiper now would symbolically have that animal replace his life, and the whole of it, the priest didn't get any of it. It was completely burnt and went completely up to God. And this is what he's saying symbolically. That's my life going up to you. And he gets this revelation. Then I said, behold, I come. In the volume of the book, it's written about me. It's written about me. I delight to do your will. Your Torah is written in my heart. This is it. This is the revelation. And then within a few more verses, but my sins have overtaken me. They're more than the hairs of my head. In other words, I fall quite short. He gets this revelation, which is ultimately quoted in Hebrews 10 to say, this is really a picture of Messiah coming into the world. He's the one that the sacrifices and offerings are pointing to. He's the one who's perfectly obedient, who can fulfill all this. So when David says you never asked for sacrifice and offering, of course God did. Of course he did. He has the whole system of Torah where he lays it out, requires it, and says you have this, you have options to do this is required, etc., etc. Either David is saying throw out the Torah, has no meaning, or he's saying I got a deeper insight. And that's the whole thing of it. You just don't want a sacrifice, you want me. You just don't want an animal on the altar, you want my life on the altar, which every follower of Jesus would immediately think of Romans 12, that we are called to lay our own lives as living sacrifices on the altar, that our whole life is now given over to God. But the idea that David was saying that God did not like sacrifices, or he was repudiating sacrifices, again, is contrary to the life of David, contrary to Torah, and contrary to the meaning of this. And as I understand it, this revelation bursts in him, and then he's confronted with his sins again. You almost get the feeling that he's preaching this, he's proclaiming it, this excitement, this insight, and then the revelation of his own sin is there. And again, I ask the question, so David would have said, hey guys, forget this, fold up the tabernacle. Boy, was I wrong. All this money I got stored up for a temple, let's just give that to the poor. Boy, how can I be so stupid? God doesn't want any of this. But what about what's written in the Torah? No. It's talking about me. It's talking about you. Obviously not. I know it's ridiculous to even suggest that, but I want to carry out what would have been the case if he was repudiating it. To say it once more, I don't want to overemphasize the point, but it must be emphasized that the prophets did not repudiate Torah, and David did not repudiate Torah. In fact, one of the arguments that traditional Jews give, well, we're not going to believe in Jesus because he abolished the Torah. I don't care how many miracles he performed. Oh, but you're saying the prophets abolished it? The prophets repudiated it? David abolished it? David repudiated it? Of course not. And we'll also see later this week that Yeshua himself did not abolish Torah. Yeah, but aren't there verses that are much more explicit than this? Aren't there verses that go into much more detail than this? Didn't the prophets themselves, God say, stop bringing the